Have you ever felt like you did everything right, but it all went wrong anyway? Like you followed the rules, spoke the truth, and your reward was being thrown into a pit? If so, then you need to hear the story of Jeremiah, the prophet who was left to die in the mud. Our story starts with a young man, Jeremiah. Imagine being just a kid and God Himself speaks to you. He gives you a mission, a purpose. He tells you, don't be afraid of anyone, because I am with you. With that divine promise ringing in his ears, Jeremiah steps onto the stage of history. His job, to deliver a message to the people of Jerusalem. It wasn't an easy message. It was a warning, a desperate plea from God. Turn back from your wicked ways, or your great city will be destroyed. Now, you'd think people would listen, right? A direct message from God. But that's not how it went down. People don't always like hearing the truth, especially when it points out their own mistakes. Jeremiah wasn't popular. He wasn't invited to parties. Instead, he was labeled a traitor, a downer, a public enemy. The leaders and officials of Jerusalem looked at him and said, "This man weakens the hands of our soldiers. All he ever talks about is disaster and doom. He's demoralizing the entire city." They didn't see a messenger from God. They saw a threat to their comfort and their power. And so, they decided to silence him. The powerful officials of the city seized Jeremiah, but they didn't just put him in a normal prison. No, they chose a place of slow, agonizing despair. They took him to a cistern, a deep, man-made pit dug into the earth to collect rainwater. But this cistern was empty of water. At the bottom, there was only thick, foul-smelling mud. They lowered him down, and with a sickening thud, Jeremiah landed in the muck. The mud sucked at his feet, his ankles, his legs pulling him down. He sank helpless into the cold, sticky darkness. Imagine that moment. Above him, the circle of light from the opening grew smaller and smaller until it vanished completely. He was plunged into absolute blackness. No light, no sound, except for the squelch of the mud and the frantic beating of his own heart. He would call out, but his voice would just be swallowed by the thick earthen walls. No one answered. He was completely, terrifyingly alone. Think about the psychological torment. This was a man who had dedicated his entire life to serving God. He had been faithful. He spoke the exact words God gave him, even when it was dangerous, even when it cost him everything. And his reward for this unwavering obedience was to be abandoned by his own people, left to starve and suffocate in a muddy hole. The chains of loneliness and rejection must have felt as heavy and suffocating as the mud that held his body captive. Doubts must have swirled in the darkness. God, you said you were with me. Where are you now? It was a test of faith in its most raw and brutal form. He was in the belly of the earth, forgotten by the world above. But here's the turning point of the story, the moment a sliver of light pierces the suffocating darkness. God had not forgotten his prophet. While the powerful men of Jerusalem congratulated themselves on getting rid of the troublesome Jeremiah, God was working through the most unlikely of people. His rescuer wasn't a king, a priest, or a warrior. It was a man named Ebed-Melech, a foreign servant in the king's palace, an outsider. He heard what had happened to Jeremiah, and his heart was moved with compassion and a sense of justice. Risking his own safety, this humble servant went directly to the king. He boldly said, "My lord the king, these men have done evil in all that they did to Jeremiah the prophet, whom they have cast into the cistern, and he is likely to die for hunger in the place where he is." He spoke truth to power, defending the very man everyone else had condemned. The king, perhaps pricked by his conscience, listened. He gave Ebed-Melech permission to rescue Jeremiah. So the servant gathered a few men and went to the cistern, but he didn't just throw down a rough rope. He thought about Jeremiah's condition. He gathered old rags and worn-out clothes. He lowered them down with the ropes and called out to the prophet, "Put these rags under your armpits, beneath the ropes, so they don't cut into your skin." It was an act of incredible tenderness and care in a story filled with so much cruelty. And so, slowly, painfully, they pulled him out. Jeremiah emerged from the pit caked in mud, weakened, but alive. He was pulled from the jaws of death, not by an army, but by the kindness of a single, compassionate stranger. He was saved, but the experience would mark him forever. He now carried the deep scars of rejection, a physical memory of what it feels like to be utterly abandoned by your own people. The story doesn't end there. As Jeremiah had warned, the great city of Jerusalem eventually fell. The Babylonian army came, broke through the walls, and destroyed the city and its temple. The people who had refused to listen, who had thrown God's messenger into a pit, saw his prophecies come true in the most devastating way possible. They finally believed his words, but it was too late. The disaster he had spent his life trying to prevent had come to pass. So, what do we take away from this intense and powerful story? It shows us that speaking the truth can be a lonely and dangerous path. It reminds us that our faith can be tested in the deepest, darkest pits of despair, where it feels like God has gone silent. But it also shows us that God never truly abandons us. He can send help from the most unexpected places, not always through kings and armies, but often through the quiet courage of ordinary, compassionate people. Jeremiah's story is a testament to the endurance of faith in the face of suffering, and a chilling reminder that ignoring the truth doesn't make it go away. It just makes the consequences, when they finally arrive, that much more severe. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that dives deep into the powerful stories that have shaped our world. We'll see you in the next video.